Gweithio dros ei llwybrau a thaim o'i hyd. Tir oedd ein dewinoedd ar gan yn un ar gwynt yr
Hi and welcome to the second part of this two-part series looking at national parks from all around the world. We're so lucky to have some more fantastic guests today who have agreed to speak to us about their special areas and to let us know what it's like to work in national parks overseas. I'm Angela Jones and I'm Partnerships Manager of the National Park here in Eryri, and I can't wait to find out more about all of these places. Well, my first guest today is, and I'm delighted to welcome Margaret Flaherty from Connemara National Park in Ireland, right over there on the west coast of Ireland. So welcome, Margaret.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
Yeah, and it's great to speak to you as well. And gosh, yeah, it must be so beautiful there this time of year. And I was actually seeing that, in fact, your role in your job description, it says supervisor guide for the Western region. So it's not just Connemara that you actually cover. You work for the Park Service, is that right?
Yeah, so my job would be looking after all the visitor and education services in the Western region of for the National Parks and Wildlife Service. So I would cover Connemara and County Mayo. So most of my work would be within the national parks, but then we do outreach to surrounding communities, and there's also a couple of smaller sites that we might do work in as well, you know, bringing groups to and doing outreach to schools.
Yeah, sure. Well, that sounds like an enormous job. Is it? It's not just you in that department, is it?
It's not just me. No, there's two teams of guides. I have guides that are based out of Connemara National Park. I would have one guide that would be our education officer. So she would be dealing with the schools and doing a lot of outreach to schools and special events for children then in the national park itself. And then in Wild Rhifyn National Park in County Mayo, I would have another team of guides based out of the Ballycroy Visitor Centre, and we would do likewise. We would have school groups. We'd be going out to school groups and having school groups coming into the visitor centre as well to experience the different places in the national park.
Oh, that's fantastic. I bet they love coming to visit the national park. And is that generally primary schools or secondary, or is it a combination of both, or?
A combination of both. So luckily here in Ireland, nature studies is on the curriculum for primary, and also secondary school students that are studying science, and at higher levels, biology, ecology would be an element of some of their work in those subjects. So they would come in and do some ecology studies in the national park.
Yeah, wonderful. And do you have schools or education groups from further away as well, from overseas, maybe coming to visit also, or is it very much a local programme that you've got going on there?
From time to time, we do have visitors coming, international school groups coming. In Connemara, we get a lot of French groups that come to us, and we'd give them a guided tour in English along one of the nature trails there. So Connemara is very popular with French visitors in general. So a lot of the school children on their overseas trips would like to include Connemara National Park in their tour of Ireland.
Wow, that sounds amazing. And I guess that leads us on really to asking you to describe a little bit about Connemara National Park. I was reading that it was only designated as a national park in 1980, is that right?
That is correct, yeah. So it's relatively young. We obviously celebrated our 40th anniversary last year. So the national park is is very small. It's only 2,000 hectares. The national parks in Ireland are state-owned lands, so they're different to the national parks in the UK, where you have people living and working in your national parks. So I guess how the national park came about was the lands of the national park had been previously owned by some large landowners, including the Kylemore Abbey estate, and also a religious order, the Christian Brothers, that would have had a school not in the park but beside the park, and they would have had some of their farmland was where the national park lands are currently on. So the state would have brought those lands together in the 70s. Right. They would have been transferred to the state, and in 1980 then the lands were established as a national park. So the national parks are recognised by the IUCN in Ireland as Category 2 national parks, which means that the primary objective is nature conservation, and then followed by education and recreation as well. So yeah, and I guess it's only a very small part of the Connemara region that is designated as national park, even though there are conservation areas and designations beyond the boundaries of the national park as well.
I see. So yeah, as you mentioned, there's nobody actually living inside the national park. It is completely protected area. That's really interesting. Yeah.
So there are some old homesteads and some old huts and shelters that would have previously been occupied either by individuals or people working for the previous owners of the larger landowners, but they're gone to ruin now. The visitor centre buildings, which would be the main, I guess, focal point for visitors coming to the park, they were actually old farm buildings belonging to the Letterfrack Industrial School, which was like a borstal for boys. So those buildings have been converted to the needs of the national park. So the farm buildings have become the visitor centre with an exhibition about the park. We have a little audiovisual theatre that was the hen house, and our park office and admin building, it was the infirmary for the school. So there's nice kind of history of those buildings, and a sad history as well, because these industrial schools, there was, it wasn't the nicest part of our history, but those buildings now are being used for very positive purposes.
Yeah, exactly. Repurposing and still being able to convey that history in a positive way must be wonderful. And so, do visitors have to go through the visitor centre in order to access the national park?
Yes, because most of the national park is very mountainous. So, there's very few people that will kind of venture into the deeper national park, for the want of a better description. But what we have, so visitors arrive into the main visitor centre, which is in Letterfrack Village. And then we have a trail that goes right to the top of a mountain called Diamond Hill. So a lot of visitors know about this walk, and a lot of them are coming just to walk Diamond Hill. So it would be probably the only what we'd call a mountain in Ireland that has a trail right up to the top of it. So it's a huge attraction. So visitors have to pass by the visitor centre to access that trail. So it's not a very high mountain. It's only about 450 meters. It's still, quite a tough and challenging hike, even with the path. But once you get to the top of the hill, you're rewarded with stunning views right into the 12 Bens mountain range, which would be a major mountain range in Connemara. So they're seeing into the national park, but they also get views of the surrounding seascapes and islands, and it's very rewarding, the views that people experience from the top.
I bet there must be some incredible sunsets up there as well. Wow.
Yeah, incredible sunsets, incredible sunrises,
Sure.
and we're also involved now with the local group, the Connemara Dark Skies group,
Wow.
and we have a couple of avid amateur astrophotographers.
Right.
So we've got some really amazing photographs now of the Milky Way from Diamond Hill. So yeah, that's becoming um, I guess something that people are more aware of now, the whole issue of light pollution and how important that our national parks are, you know, in terms of protecting the night sky, because we can completely control, lighting in the national parks by virtue of it being state owned. So yeah, we've got a lot of interest in dark skies now.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we are a Dark Skies Reserve as well. So anytime you want to share some information or some activities on that, just let us know. And that, I guess, leads me to ask, is that the case that you have, because we have these special qualities, that as the reason for our designation, and is that the same there then? Was there certain things that, are designated as the reasons for your, becoming national park status in 1980?
So I guess there is the designations, the specific conservation designations came after the establishment of the national
Okay,
park.
yeah.
So I guess the national parks in Ireland are they're usually mountainous or boggy terrain that there hasn't been any, they haven't been suitable for development.
Right.
So they've been kind of protected by virtue of their unsuitability for development. So I guess in terms of the significant habitats that we have in the park, the mountains themselves, and also the blanket bog. So blanket bogs are obviously very unique habitats that have formed in areas where we get a lot of precipitation. So there's very unique habitats associated with bogs in terms of different types of heath and, grasslands, and then, species. We've got rivers and we've got some water bodies in the parks as well that, where we find things like otters and salmon and pearl mussels. So those kind of features, they were protected in the national park from 1980, and then we got the European designations. Special areas of conservation came in through the EU Habitats Directive, and some of the features within the national park would be qualifying interests for the designation of special areas of conservation. So some of these, bog habitats and the species that I mentioned there, they would be, species and habitats that we would need to be protecting through, our regulations that come from the Habitats Directive.
Yeah, I mean, that must mean that it's quite, you have to be quite careful about where people walk, I guess, yeah?
That's it, exactly. And before the introduction of this trail onto Diamond Hill, we actually had issues with erosion because people were still walking the hill before the trail was there. So the trail actually came because of issues around erosion of the habitats on the mountain. So it's actually really, the mountain has recovered since the introduction of that trail, and the majority of our visitors stick to it. There's always going to be a few that will stray off the beaten path, and that's not a problem. But yeah, the trail has really helped because it's providing that opportunity for visitors to get out and explore the park while maintaining the integrity of the habitats that are there.
Oh, wow, that sounds brilliant. And we have to ask you, what's your favorite bit of the national park? If you had to choose one, where would you put yourself?
Well, my favorite part is a little bit off the beaten track. We have some very old, we've a couple of ancient tombs in the park.
Wow.
And so a megalithic tomb dating back, maybe 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. And it's a little off what's called the bog road. in the national park. Not a lot of people go there, so it's nice and quiet and peaceful, and you get a really beautiful view out over Bodlediad Bay. So Bodlediad in Irish means the red gap, and this bay, it's a little inlet that has lots and lots of seaweed in it, so it probably appears kind of a reddy color. And you're looking out towards my actual home place is quite close to Connemara National Park, so I can't quite see the house I grew up in, but I can, see nearby it. So it's just nice and peaceful, and yeah, a nice tranquil place to just enjoy the views away from the lots of tourists that visit us. So, there are some opportunities to get away from the busy parts of the park.
Yeah, and that's so important every now and again to do that, isn't it? It sounds wonderful. You've painted a beautiful picture there for me. I had the vision in my mind as you were talking there. Just on that, I mean, wonder what sort of numbers you get in terms of visitors per year. Have you got a counter, or have you got an idea? I'm sure that's changed sort of slightly recently with last year, of course, but on average, how many would you expect there?
That is something we're trying to really get to grips with. We did have just 2 counters previously to try and figure out, how many visitors we're getting, but it was very difficult because there was 2 kind of access points, and I think it's hard to count visitors, as you know. So we've increased the number of counters that we have on, the different trails. At the moment, we're estimating somewhere between 250 and 300,000 that we get. And those visitors are all kind of the majority are confined to this Diamond Hill Visitor Centre area. So it's quite a heavy burden on that area. But yeah, it's roughly, 250,000 upwards we get. But in the next, I guess, when things return to normal again and we'll have a lot more international visitors, we'll get a good handle on the number of visitors we're getting with this increase in trail counters that we have. So yeah,
and is there something, before you were to visit Connemara, is there something that you'd like people to think about before they come, or what should they know about the place before they arrive, or something they should or shouldn't do whilst they're there, or any of those things?
Well, for me, because working in the national park, you get to see the park at different times of the year. And obviously a lot of people want to come, when the weather might be a bit better, because, it does rain during our summers as well, as you know. But I would say to think about maybe coming to visit in the off-peak season, maybe, into autumn and into winter time, because sometimes we get really amazing weather, there's like amazing sunsets or sunrises on those really crisp, cold days. And another thing I really enjoy in the autumn is hearing the deers. When the deer are rutting, they come quite close, they come down from the hills and they can be quite close to the visitor centre. And, just going in the early morning or in the late evening and just to hear that noise is pretty special. And it's also a lot quieter visitor wise during the off-peak times. So that would be my tip. If you're planning to visit us, think about maybe coming in the autumn or winter or even early spring, when it's a little bit quieter and you might have the place more to yourself.
That's wonderful. Well, yes, you've certainly painted such an incredible picture. I'm seeing lots of lovely colours and all of these fantastic species. And as you said, the seascapes, that must be just tremendous. So thank you so much for giving your time to us today and for describing everything so beautifully. And I'm sure that many people listening to the podcast will be planning that off-peak visit to Connemara.
Thank you.
Well, hiya. Today I'm so delighted to be joined by Dave Rogers, who's Senior Ranger in the Department of Conservation in Aotearoa, in New Zealand there. Hopefully I said that correctly.
You did.
Thank you. So I'll say noswaith da from us here in Wales, but it's a very good morning to you there, Dave, and thank you so much for getting up early this morning to come and chat to us.
Thank you. Yes, yeah, it's a bit cold this end of the world at the moment. We've just had heavy snow on the mountain, and so early mornings are very, very cold.
Oh yeah, I bet. Wow. Yeah, well, it's not that warm here, even though we're in the height of summer, So yeah. And so you're here to chat with us a little bit about Egmont National Park, yeah? Is that where you're actually based, or are you based somewhere else? Because I see you work for the Department of Conservation. So is that within the national park, or how does that work there?
Right, yeah, just to give you a bit of context around that, I suppose. Originally, I worked and was employed by the Egmont National Park Board back in 1975. And over that time, we've had a number of restructures, and government departments have devolved and evolved into new setups now. And so through that period, we ended up pulling together a lot of government departments that were working in the same fields of protection of natural areas and wildlife, and then they made that new department the Department of Conservation. So national parks are part of it, but it's a much bigger setting. There's all the reserves, there's the marine reserves, and that they all come under conservation. So yeah, so that's the new structure. So the park itself is, as I say, is only probably within the region I work in, or the area I work in, is only about a third of the land mass of what we're responsible for as a department. And we have a whole gambit of or silos of work areas that people focus on. And so my area is particularly around visitor assets and historic heritage assets. So it's all that recreation aspect. So tracks, huts, buildings, amenity areas, all that sort of stuff I'm responsible for, along with all our historic heritage sites. So.
Yeah, and how many people does that entail then? I mean, it can't be you doing all of that work, crikey.
Right, we have a team here. So I'm based in a place called New Plymouth. It's a small city in the province of Taranaki on the west coast of New Zealand in the North Island. So I'm based in New Plymouth, so I'm about 20 minutes away from the national park itself.
Right.
But the team itself based here, there's probably on the books between 50 and 70 people working for the conservation department. Oh, wow. Some full-time, some part-time, some job sharing, contractors and the like. In my sphere of work, which is, I say, recreation and historic heritage, it's a team of 4 of us. So, it's a team of 5. But predominantly my role has changed from a field-based to a desk type role. So
yeah. And can you tell us a little bit about Egmont and what makes it so special?
Okay, Egmont National Park. Excuse me. The maunga, or the mountain itself, dominates the landscape. It's a volcanic cone. It's a dormant volcanic cone, stands 2,300 metres high in the middle of the province. It has 2 extinct volcanic cones, also adjacent to it, sitting inside the park, which are the Puakai and the Kaitaki range. And then outside the park, the oldest of the volcanic cones is what we call the Sugarloaf Islands, which is a marine area, and that is probably 1 3/4 million years old. So the volcanic succession for the area is 1 3/4 million years through to 20,000 years across those mountain ranges. So the park itself is 33,000 hectares in size. Predominantly podocarp forest or montane forest, which is coming out of the lowlands up into the semi-alpine areas, and then the cone itself is way up in the alpine areas. So it's an exposed, craggy rock volcanic cone. At the moment, there's a lot of seismic and volcanic monitoring happening in the park. Hence, because of the volcanic history of the region, where Taranaki itself is living within that time frame of some sort of volcanic activity happening. So probably between every 300 to 350 years, something catastrophic can happen from a volcanic sense, and we just happen to live in that time frame right now. Recent studies or monitoring has, and we've got dozens of people from the universities and that doing all sorts of geological science studies here. So, and the more they're learning is they're saying maybe they've misinterpreted some of that catastrophic stuff to be not so much one event, but being a series of events over a shorter time period. So I suppose what's unique is that you can, for our province, is you can surf in the morning and ski in the afternoon if you like, or vice versa. It doesn't really matter. So, we have a coastline right around, just a few miles beyond the park. So I think that's its attraction to visitors, is that they can have a choice.
Yeah, and that's in a sense is similar to Snowdonia, because we have exactly the same, the mountains and the coastline so close to each other, and in quite a relatively small area, so people don't have to travel too far to get that diversity. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and is Mount Taranaki, is that what people, when people come to visit there, are they heading to climb that mountain? Is that their sort of main goal, or is that what
absolutely.
like to do? Yeah.
Working with the Tourism Taranaki or Venture Taranaki team who work for the district councils, they say the mountain is only second to the beaches. So most tourists or most visitation to the region people will want to go to the beaches, and then the next place will be they'll want to go to the mountain. And of course, the number one destination is most people will come hopefully hoping they can climb to the top. And most people could do it on a good day, but, it has a high death toll because of people probably out of their depth trying to do things, or just poorly prepared, poorly informed, and just poor experience, really.
What sort of time does it take for people to actually climb that mountain? How long would it take an average person then?
We got fitness freaks that will talk of just a couple of hours.
Oh,
and
wow.
Then you've got people that will do it in probably 14 hours.
Yeah.
So basically the advice we give to people is plan for a whole day, get away early and carry a torch just in case, but plan for a whole day, because we don't know the fitness levels of these people that come here, and ego gets in the way sometimes, and at the end of the day they lose, or they don't realise, forget that they're actually climbing a mountain. They're not walking, they're climbing. So plan a day. It's a day visit, basically.
Sure, and it's got some altitude, right? I bet as well. So
It certainly has, yes.
Yeah, wow. And so is that some of the work that you do, is getting those messages out to people in advance as well, and trying to prepare people for what they might experience when they come there, yeah?
Yeah. Look, that's one of my biggest roles, is dealing with visitor risk management. So we're currently reviewing all our sites or visitor sites in all the conservation areas, not just the national park, but all our conservation areas. So we look at every site, we identify every hazard we know exists on those sites, and then we look at how we're going to mitigate the risks, either to property or to people, of those hazards. So that's a big focus. My role particularly, I suppose, is all around visitors, providing services and facilities for them. But at the same time, the key thing we want is, we're here for conservation. We're here to protect, preserve and conserve these intrinsic values in these special places. But at the same time, to get support for that, we need people to witness the conservation work that's going on. And there's a lot of conservation work happening, but a lot of it's invisible to the visitor. So it's my job to make sure, or part of my job, along with other teams like the community teams and that, is to advocate the values of what we're doing. And the way I can do it best is to provide facilities and services that allow people to get out there and witness the very good work that's going on. The conservation values are actually out there. And I want them to walk away with a positive experience. And the value of that is that if they get that positive experience, they're going to be supportive of what we're trying to do. If they don't witness the stuff and don't understand why we do it, then how can we ever ask the community to support us in anything we want to do? So that's the key thing. So tracks, facilities, huts, all those sorts of things are all mechanisms we can set up and have in place for the visitor to get the best positive experience they can in a conservation area.
Yeah, great. And what kind of visitor numbers do you get there in Egmont?
Pre-COVID, between 400 and 450,000 visitors a year were coming into the park. In this COVID era at the moment, it's probably dropped back more like 300, 350. Interestingly, all of a sudden, when the international tourism stopped, the domestic market picked up hugely. So in some of our areas, we've seen very little drop off, but in some of the other areas that really were reliant on international tourism, they've been hit quite hard.
Yeah, I bet. You sound so passionate about your role there, and what is it that you love about your job there?
Well, you're right. Yeah, I love it. And the key is don't see it as a job. It's a way of life. Yeah. You know, as I say, I've worked here now in the park for 46 years. I get excited to come to work. I don't like being off work. I very rarely get sick. I don't have time to get sick. I've got too many things to do. And look, I work with great people, interestingly in this time, a lot of young people, real tech savvy. Technology is not my forte at all, but there's plenty around that will help me through those things. But on the same thing, it's the diversity in the work. And because I've been here for so long, I get pulled out to deal with a lot of one-off historical type issues that pop up. So I get that opportunity. The other thing I probably am pretty active in advocating. So I talk to as many user groups and visitor groups as I can. So I'll go out and spread the word and try to, particularly the user groups, it's important because we need them to be supportive. And in that way, I'll go and talk to them and I'll keep them abreast of what we've done to date and where our thinking is in the future. And I try to bring them into that because the last thing, you don't want any surprises. So when decisions are made, there is a bit of context with them already because I've already got in there and suggested the possibilities are we're thinking this way because. So, yeah, look, it's a way of life. And if you see it that way, you take the good with the bad and it's a great place to be. But if it's just a job, then the chances are you won't hang around long.
Oh, that's a wonderful philosophy. I love that. That's great. And do you have, just to try and paint a picture a little bit to some people who are listening, do you have maybe a favourite spot in the national park or areas? Yeah, that you can tell us about?
There are. There's lots of lovely spots, depending on the time of the year, the location in the park. There's all these beautiful, intrinsically special places that are around the park. But me personally, I like the sub-alpine area up in the herb fields. I love it up there. The herb fields, they have a khaki blanket of all sorts of natural herbs and native little ground cover plants, and I find that quite nice. And on a nice day, the views to be seen from the alpine, sub-alpine areas is just unbelievable. So yeah, that's my favourite spot. But sometimes in the summer, down in some of the waterways, beautiful waterfalls, and we've got lakes in the park, and that are all pretty special places at the right time.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. I could almost get the kind of smells and the sights and the
Yes,
sounds and everything there from what you were describing. So thank you so much. Thanks for sharing that with us today, and it's been absolutely wonderful to speak to you.
it's a pleasure. Thank you very much, and all the best to the National Park colleagues out there, and do enjoy what you're doing.
Well, today I am delighted to say that I'm here with Ales Zdesar, who is Head of Planning in the National Park Management Team in Triglav National Park in Slovenia. And this is particularly special for us because Snowdonia and Triglav are actually twinned as national parks. So welcome, Alice. It's so wonderful to speak to you this morning.
Welcome and a big hello from Slovenia, from Triglav National Park, to our friends, to Snowdonia. I'm glad that we can speak something about our relationship and also about our national park. So thank you.
Yeah, and it's been great because our staff have had an opportunity to visit you, and you have also been here to Snowdonia, as you were explaining to me just before we started recording. So yeah, this relationship is really important to us, and we'd love to explain a little bit to our listeners a bit about Triglav National Park, a little bit about the background to the park and its designation, and of course what makes the area so very special. I understand it's your 40th anniversary this year, is that correct?
Yeah, it is 40th university, but Triglav National Park has more than one birthday. So
I see.
the history of national park goes more than 100 years in history. So the first ideas of national park was started in 1908, and then the first part of today's national park area, the small one, was established in 1924, and then a little bit bigger one in 1961. And then in 1981, we got the area of national park that we know today. So this national park, which is the only national park in Slovenia, covers more than 4% of the whole area of the Slovenia. So it's quite big. But you know, Slovenia is very small. So, and this national park is established in the area of the Alps region. It is one of the 13 national parks around the Alps, and it is on the most eastern and south part of the Alps. So what you can see here in national park are high mountains, steep mountains made of limestone, and because of that we have a lot of caves, a lot of gorges, and which is not unusual, which is unusual for the limestone landscape, is that we have 14 mountain lakes, beautiful mountain lakes. We have glacier valleys with alpine rivers, and what is also special is that 2/3 of national park is covered with pristine forests. On the higher level we get larch forest, then spruce forest and beech forest, a lot of biodiversity. We have all 3 large carnivores inside the national park, lynx, bears, wolf. So that is something that we are very proud of. But aside of nature conservation, this area is also been preserved, or we are aiming to protect cultural landscape. Inside the national park we have settlements, and what is special, we have these alpine meadows, pastures, where farmers in the summertime they're getting cows and sheep on the higher levels, and there are small settlements, shepherd settlements with barns, houses, and so on, which makes this landscape very special.
Absolutely, wow! And I can see, several similarities there between Triglav and Snowdonia, of course. And farming is such an important way of life here as well in the mountain communities that we have within the national park. Does that mean that there's a particular kind of produce that comes from the national park that the farmers sell, for example?
Yeah, the special product is absolutely cheese. We have on one part of national park we have cow cheese. On the other part we have sheep cheese. So it's a bit different from one area to another, because our national park is this area is special because we have this Mediterranean side of the Slovenia and the Alpine area, and the national park is in between. So there are different influences also from the weather and so on.
Yeah. And when people come to visit the national park, are they coming generally to walk in the mountains or swim in the lakes? Is that the main activity that people take part in there?
Yeah, the main activity is absolutely hiking. The national park is covered with more than 800 kilometers of mountain paths. It's not the easiest paths that there are. This is high mountain area, so when people visiting this area, they must be equipped. They must know where they go. But mainly hiking, then also cycling in the valleys, also swimming in one lake, the biggest lake, Bohin Lake. So these are the main activities. Yes.
Yeah. And do you have a favorite part of the national park at all that you could tell us about?
The favorite part, I'm not a guy that have some special areas. I like the national park, the whole range of diversity that offers. But if I mentioned that, it should be the Triglav Lakes Valley. The Triglav Lakes Valley, this is the valley where we have 7 beautiful lakes, and where the national park was also established, as I mentioned before, more than 100 years ago. So this area is very special. Also from the geological part, I'm a geologist myself. So this area, you can find fossils, like shell fossils inside this area. And I don't know if you know the term karst. Yeah, this area is beautiful from this point of view, because you have so many natural values that comes from this karst, from the limestone, and it's beautiful.
It sounds absolutely stunning. And could you maybe tell us a little about your job there, your role, what you do from day to day, and what goes into the management of the national park there?
Yes, the main role is that we are writing consensus for people that they want to build something inside the national park. Mostly we are consulting with them. We are also making some publication how to traditionally renovate houses and so on. This is the main part. The second biggest part is that we are dealing the last couple of years with high pressure of tourism. Right. So we are managing that with I'm working on the carrying capacities. Yes. We are trying to get some numbers, the limited numbers of visitors, that they can go to some gorges, that they are open for visitors and so on. This area is very interesting but very hard, because it's really difficult to get along with the Ministry of for Tourism and so on. It's like the biggest task now, and also we are dealing with traffic. Right. The national park is open we don't have any tickets to entering tickets and so on, and there are many roads that go to park, and we see a lot of people traveling with their own individual motorcycles, which is not good because there are not enough parking spaces and so on. So we're trying to close some valleys and to establish public transportation, which is not good for now.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand this issue. It's something I'm working on as well here in Snowdonia, and we have very similar challenges. Yeah. And in that sense, then, are there some messages that you would like to send to people who have an interest to visit the national park? What should they know about the area before coming, or how could they research a little more about the area?
There's so many information nowadays on the internet. They could visit our own national park site, where they get a lot of information. But as I mentioned before, this area is high mountain area, so they must be prepared when hiking. They must look for what kind of weather will be the next few days. I encourage them to park their cars, if they come with cars, on the designated places. And when they're walking inside the national park, they stick to the paths. They don't go anywhere else. So they stick to the paths. They use mountain huts for sleeping. They use camping grounds. That they don't sleep like in nature. And that they don't swim in the mountain lakes, which this is forbidden.
All right.
Yeah, so these are some of the informations, but
yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, I think we can relate to all of those messages. Those are very similar messages that we sent out also. And how has it been over the last year with the impact of COVID? I mean, have you seen a huge difference?
We see a huge difference in like foreign visitors. But this year, the tourism went already up in high numbers. But we Slovenians are traditionally people that they do a lot of mountain hiking. So in this couple of years, the Slovenians were our guests in the high numbers. In some places, higher than ever before.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like really busy time. Our government, what they did was, in this COVID time, people got like touristic bonds, that we say, like some money for spending in the touristic places for free.
I see.
Yeah.
Wow. To encourage the economy, I see.
To encourage the economy.
Yeah.
So the number of visitors, of Slovenian visitors, was really high.
Gosh. And I guess, I mean, that's something we're seeing as well, mainly because of the restrictions of travel. So we're seeing a lot more people staying in the UK this year, and definitely we have higher numbers in the national park this year and last year after we reopened from the lockdowns.
Yeah, this is the national park have like two sides of the story. On one side, there's nature conservation, a beautiful area. But this also means that a lot of people would like to see that. So it's like we are on the edge of where this will lead in the next few years. If there will be too much tourists, there will be restrictions. No one would like that, but I think the restriction will come to preserve nature. This is the main goal.
Yeah. Well, if they've been for the first time to the national park and probably seen how beautiful it is, I'm sure they will want to return again. Yeah, absolutely. And the same here. We think, is this something that will continue now that people have come to national parks for the first time, maybe before they would go overseas, and now they've seen what's available here. Yeah, it's going to be interesting over the next few years to see how this changes. Yeah.
We must be careful, because when not only beauty of the site, also if this site is overcrowded, it's not really good anymore. So I don't think that people would come again if it would be too crowded. So we must be very careful.
Yeah, and I guess one of the main things we want to encourage people is to be responsible and to respect the area, of course. Yeah,
of course, but it's really difficult in this time of Instagram tourism and so on. So
absolutely. Well, I think we'll end up chatting about this a lot over the next few years between our two national parks. And yeah, thank you so much for painting such a wonderful picture of your role there and of Triglav for us today. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you for inviting, and good day and good year to you. Bye.
Well, I've got to say, diolch o galon. Thank you so much to all of our amazing guests on this second part of looking at national parks all over the world. We have had some amazing guests, and we've learned so much about all of these different areas, and it's been lovely to transport ourselves there just for a short time. So what's coming next? Well, in September, our next Welsh podcast is Egmont NP, or the folk history of this area. And then our English podcast will be all about the dark skies with our dark skies officer. If you'd like to follow us on social media, you'll be able to